I did this for me, but I also did it if my situation and what I've been through and the story I told can help someone else, even one person.
Yeah.
Then, that makes it all worth it. I've had other women that tell me about their relationships, and, I have a friend of mine right now that she's in a verbally abusive relationship, and I'm trying to kind of coach her to prepare to leave because she's miserable.
Yeah. Welcome to the Growth and Thriving podcast, where we celebrate people's journeys from adversity and trauma into thriving and excelling. I'm Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak. I'm your host through the podcast. And today we are talking with Wendy Anderson, who is a friend of mine and a member of our online Growth and Thriving After Trauma community through Facebook. Wendy offered to come on to the show and share her story with our listeners and with our community, and talk about some of the things that she's been through and how they've impacted her, and what her journey's been like moving from some of those difficult times into a life that looks more like growth and thriving for her. We might also focus in on some tools or experiences that have been helpful. But that said, let's get things underway. So welcome, Wendy. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So been a little while since we've seen each other, since you moved from Colorado to Texas.
A little bit.
Yeah. Things are going well?
Yes, they're going great. It's too hot down here.
Good. I'm glad to hear that things are going great. Texas has got like a tiny little winter and a lot of hellfire in the summer.
Yeah, it's for this Midwest girl, it is hot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we jump in and you can sort of just tell your story, talk about, start wherever you like, and talk about some of your life experiences and what you've been through, the things you feel like have shaped you, good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of riff from there.
Okay. Well, I can't say I had any kind of like weird childhood growing up. Parents are still married. One older sister. Nothing special in my childhood, but as I got older, I was 23 years old and I got married for the first time. Look back on it now, not the best of choices, but the guy was very charming and sweet and caring and all that kind of stuff that, when you're 23 and naive, that you fall for as a woman. And got pregnant, got married, and, I heard I'm doing this because I love you. I know better because I love you. You have to listen to me, would not want me to go to my parents' house because he didn't know what my parents were going to say about him. And I was super close with my dad's parents, my grandparents, and every summer I would go down and spend time with them for a couple weeks, or as I got older, like a couple extended weekends through. And every single time I would go to their house, we'd have a fight because he said my family was going to brainwash me into divorcing him. Started to tell me how I need to lose weight. Are you sure you want to eat that? You shouldn't eat that. You can't eat that. And then I got to the point where he actually started taking away my plate when he thought I was eating too much. Started telling me how to dress, who to talk to. Didn't want me visiting my family. Didn't want me going out with girlfriends. And I think I was married for about 9.5 years to him. And about year 4 or 5, I finally started seeing the signs of the controlling narcissistic behavior in him. But I was bound and set. I was married. I was going to make it work. I wasn't going to do divorce. And it got to the point where he would force me to work out. Not that working out's a bad thing, but he was having me do things that I didn't want to do. You know, like I wanted to just go, you know, quick little run in the mornings. And it was like, no, you have to go this amount of time. And if I walked rather than ran, I'd get chastised for it. And, you know, it was like, he turned it into something that wasn't fun for me. And I got to the point when he got mad at me one day and punched a hole in the wall next to my head is what really set it off for me, that there's no way in hell I can deal with this for the rest of my life. I can't do it. And then hindsight, now that I'm out of the marriage, I see all those signs of the controlling and the verbal abuse that I used to make excuses for to my family when they would tell me, he's not right. He's abusing you. No, he's not. He's my husband. He wouldn't do that to me.
When they were trying to brainwash you?
Like that. Huh?
And they were trying to brainwash you?
Yeah. You know, that's what he thought. And I didn't see it. And I, you know, no, you guys just don't understand him. You don't spend the time with him like I do. And I was 112 pounds when I left my ex-husband, and he still thought I was too fat at that weight. And my family was telling me, you're too thin. You need to gain weight. Like you need to put on some pounds, Wendy. That's not right. And now looking back at that, you know, even my second ex-husband, I didn't see it till, you know, probably recently I look back, and he wasn't nearly as narcissistic and controlling. He really wasn't controlling, but he was verbally abusive in ways that I don't think he even realized. But it has had a huge impact on my self-esteem, my own body image of myself. You know, the man I'm with now, he is amazing and telling me that, no, you're beautiful who you are. You know, you're a wonderful woman. You're gorgeous. And I'm like, but even, you know, I've gained a little bit of weight, and no, I love that. You're gorgeous. You're a woman. You've had a baby. You know, when my first ex-husband and I, when I got pregnant, I ended up having a stillborn. And he wasn't supportive of it. Like, he didn't understand why I would cry every day, and why when his birthday came around, it was so hard for me. Well, he's gone. You should just get over it. You don't get over losing a child. To this day, I mean, my son would be turning 18 this year. And I realized that a couple weeks ago, and it hit me hard. Like, I had a couple days where I just wanted to cry because I'd have an 18-year-old boy, you know, he wasn't supportive of it. And he said I was too emotional and I needed to just suck it up. And even my second ex-husband was the same way. He didn't understand the impact of it. And it's taken me, you know, I've been divorced from my first ex-husband since 2013. And I've been to a couple different therapists. I've talked about my feelings, you know, and it's still to this day, there's certain things that come to me that still are hard to accept, you know, like being told you have a gorgeous body. You're 41 years old. You're not going to have a 20-year-old body anymore. It's still in my mind. I still see you're fat. I still hear that in my head, but it's an ongoing process of telling myself, it's not true. You actually have someone that loves you for you, you know, that's in the past. And, you know, one thing I learned in therapy was men that are, and women, I have a sister who's a narcissist too, but they break people down to make themselves feel better because they have their own self issues. And to make themselves feel better, they want to break you down. You know, that's the way I was told. And, you know, my therapist that I had told me one time, you know, that guy wanted to break me down because he knew I was such a strong woman that it was like a badge of honor for him to tear me down and make himself feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they talk about, you know, when you talk about people who have narcissistic tendencies, there's almost always, you know, from a certain perspective, they talk about the narcissistic injury. And basically it means people who act that way, you know, are compensating for the fact that they don't feel good about themselves. And so it can be very intimidating to be with somebody who, not even somebody who thinks they're amazing, just somebody who has like an average self-esteem can seem really intimidating to them. And so, yeah, they compensate by, instead of learning to elevate themselves and meet you where you are, they bring you down to meet them where they are.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think because like I have this older sister, she's 15 months older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's always been I know more than you, I'm smarter than you, I'm older than you. And then I got, she recently, she didn't like some stuff I was posting on Facebook. And she told me I needed to remove it and I needed to stop doing this, and, told me that I needed to change my life. And, before I get into a relationship, I need to be celibate for 2 years. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm in my 40s. That is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I'm in my 40s. You're not going to tell me how to live my life. Well, because I wouldn't change how I wanted to live, and I wasn't deleting stuff off of Facebook just because she didn't like it. She has decided that I'm a horrible person, and she's no longer going to talk to me because I'm not doing what she wants me to do.
Right.
And, she's very much, I know she has her own self-esteem issues. And I think she's had that since she was a young girl, but she's never, what's funny is she has a psychology degree herself and she can't see it in herself.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of us who are attracted to that field are trying to figure ourselves out. And then what happens is it becomes really like tempting. It becomes so we get very enamored with like, well, we can tell other people how they are and then avoid dealing with our own things. But there's not much growth to be had if you pursue it that way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my road. I mean, I still have my triggers, but I try to be very cognizant of it and not, I'm still to this day breaking down walls, and, thankfully the man I'm with is extremely patient and understanding of that. I mean, he himself has been through some of his own childhood traumas, so he understands those walls being up with certain things. And, it's an ongoing growth, I guess you could say, on a daily basis.
Yeah. That's one of the things. I'm actually glad you said that, because one of the things I hope to highlight quite a bit on the podcast here and through the blog and other sort of the Facebook pages is that I think we're led to believe that there's these very clean sort of barriers or transitions, right? So like leading up to a traumatic event, you are asymptomatic, right? You're healthy, you're fine. And then there's this traumatic event. And if you have reactions to that trauma over a period of time, then you have PTSD or something like that, right? Or an adjustment disorder or whatever label they choose, right? And then if you maybe get some treatment or do some sorts of therapeutic kinds of things and you start to get better, then you're good again, right? And I'm not sure that the distinctions are that clean. I think, we're all changed by the things we experience.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Whether those experiences are good, bad, or indifferent, they all change us. And so if you experience trauma, that's part of your history forever. And there may always, for the rest of your life, be things that, trigger you or things that remind you, or an occasional nightmare, or whatever that sort of thing is. The real key to something like post-traumatic growth, I think, for most people is that those experiences get fewer and further between, right? You can go months and months and months without being triggered, or very, you can go several years without having a nightmare, or whatever the case may be. So those experiences get fewer and far between. But I think the real key, like the real money, is what do the periods of time in between those triggers look like, right? If those periods of time are full with meaningful, relationships, meaningful work, or volunteer time, or, you know, you're a fellow biker, just like I am, out on the bike riding, right? Like, if you're filling your life with things that feel meaningful and important and fulfilling, right? That's really what thriving looks like. Thriving isn't the idea that you'll never have another bad day, right? Especially on something like, like your son's birthday. So, yeah, I think what you're saying fits more with the reality of what this looks like than maybe what a lot of us learned in school or think it ought to look like.
I agree. And I know for me, I have to look back at it and go, okay, I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't been through it. Do I wish I didn't have to go through what I've been through? Of course, it sucks. But at the same time, I've learned a lot about myself and who I am. And I know that it's an everyday thing. And every single person goes through something, whether it be really traumatic or just minor and you don't really think about it, but it's how you handle it.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I had my years where I was angry at the world because I lost my son.
Yeah.
So angry.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to hear the religious crap of, God wanted him for whatever reason. That it didn't fly with me. And
right.
To this day, because they still couldn't give me a reason why I lost my son. So I think that's part of the hardest part for me.
Like a medical reason, you mean?
Yeah. Like because we had an autopsy done, but they couldn't tell us a reason why. It was just like, we don't know.
Yeah. Some babies are born still.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot more frequently than what you'd think.
Right.
And there's, I've told other women where they've said something and they're like, God, I thought I was the only one. No, you're not. It's actually not that uncommon. You're not alone. I've got an aunt who had 3 miscarriages. But it's a daily process of trying to being very conscious of my own thinking and trying to think positively. And, when I do have those moments where I'm like, I need to break down and cry, I will let myself do that because I let myself feel those emotions and get it out. And then I feel better.
Right. Well, good.
At least for me.
So what do you think? I mean, you said that you went through a period of time where you were angry at the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about how you handle it now, which sounds much more adaptive, right? Sort of let it be and get it out and move past it. Do you have some sense? I'm wondering if you could share with us of what caused that transition, right? I mean, it may not have been like a one singular event or anything, but what brought you from there to here?
I think time is a big part of it. Like the first probably 5 years, every birthday, it was just, I was angry because I'd see other women having their babies and it's like, well, why does that POS get her baby and I don't? She can't even afford to have her kids.
Right.
I think part of it is just where the old saying, time heals all wounds.
Right.
You may always have that wound there, but
right.
A lot of it, I think, is just time and growing up too. I mean, it's been 18 years. So,
sure.
Over time, I've kind of been like, I can't be angry anymore. There's nothing I can do about it. It's not going to bring him back.
Yeah. And the anger is not helping anything. Right. But I think you hit on something there is, you were looking at these other women and it's like, I think if you want to stay angry, compare.
Yeah.
Compare to other people's, look at what other people do or don't have. And you will always feel like you're missing out.
Yeah. Because there's always something that someone has that you want,
right,
that you may never be able to afford or, for me, I'll never have biological children.
Right.
Does it suck? Yeah. But I'm also at an age now that I'm like, I'm glad I don't have kids because if I want to hop on that scoot and go for a ride, I hop on that scoot and I go for a ride. I don't have to worry about who's watching the kid at home. Titan goes in his crate, mama goes for a ride.
Yeah. I can, as somebody who I love being a dad. It's like my favorite thing in the world, but I spend a lot more time in the cage than I do on the scoot.
Yep. I mean, I still do here because sometimes it's just too dang hot.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. You'll get like 12 days of cool weather in like
Oh,
November,
that's comforting.
December.
Thanks.
Use them wisely.
Right?
Yeah. So, so you talked about, you said your second husband also couldn't, like neither one of the men you were married to could understand what you were going through with relation to this experience you had with your son. And the thought I had at that moment, and I didn't want to interrupt because you were on a roll, but the thought I had is like, I don't know if understanding is even the issue, right? Because it's like, okay, they can't understand. They don't know what it's like to be pregnant. They never will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they've never experienced it, and I know that maybe they have, but if they've never experienced the kind of loss of someone that's as close to you that like was literally growing inside you, right? And they can't, and not that they haven't experienced loss, but if they can't or won't for some reason understand that, right? You can be supportive, and you can be a partner, right? Without necessarily knowing what something feels like, right? I mean, that's to me, when you talk about these relationships, what I hear is the failing in it is that, okay, maybe they don't understand exactly what it's like to have a stillborn child, but there didn't seem to be an effort to at least want to understand what it meant to you.
Yeah, in that aspect, yes, because even like my second husband, he on those days or those moments where I was having that, those times, if he had just come over and given me a hug,
Right.
Baby, I can't understand,
but I care.
But I'm here.
Yeah.
Let me just hug you. Let me just sit there and cry on your chest for 20 minutes while I get it all out. Right. But neither one of them ever did that. It was, well, it's been years, suck it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'd have my female friends, obviously, I've got some really good friends I text them and they'd be like, I got you. I understand. I wish I could do something for you.
Yeah.
And I've talked to the gentleman that I'm with now, telling him that I haven't been to my son's grave in years. You need to do that, babe. You need to go back to Wisconsin. You need to go see your son.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's like, just for your own sake, one day you need to go back and just to do it. And I agree with him. I do. I need to go back just because, but it would, that's supportive to me.
Right.
That's saying, I can't understand it, and he's a father. He has a daughter himself,
mm-hmm.
So he understands the child, having that being a parent kind of aspect, but, he doesn't understand losing a child, but he understands that could be painful for me. Mm-hmm. And he's understanding of, I can't be there, but let me do what I can to support you. And this is how I support you. And just being there, just understanding that it's a rough thing to go through and that I'm going to have my moments.
That goes a long way.
It does. It does.
It also sounds like you managed, and you didn't quite say it this way, but when your two ex-husbands were not meeting your needs, it sounds like you figured out how to get those needs met, at least to some degree, elsewhere, right? You had your friend network that you went through.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have, like I said, my grandmother was a huge support growing. I mean, she was just, she's like a mom to me. So she was just growing up. She was just, she was a wonderful grandmother. Mm-hmm. And I spent every single summer with them until after I graduated high school. So huge impact on my life. But when I was going through all this, my grandma now, even to this day, I call her once a week, and it's still, she's still supportive. She might not remember everything because she's got dementia,
Sure.
but she still is supportive of, whatever I'm doing. She's always told me, I love you no matter what. I might not agree with your choices, but you're my granddaughter. And I know you're doing what you think is right for yourself at the time. She's never put me down. She's never chastised me. She's never been that way. She's always just been real supportive. And then, I've got some girlfriends that I've known. One I've known since high school. And to this day, I can call her up. When my second ex-husband came home and said he wanted a divorce and completely shocked me with it, I called her up. I was like, I need you. I need you here now. She was in Wisconsin. I was in Colorado. And she's like, can you get on a plane tomorrow? Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
She used her mileage points, $11 plane ticket, to get me to Wisconsin because she knew I needed that support at that point in time that I didn't know what to do.
Right.
I was completely lost. So, I've had some really good support system with my friends that are closer to me as friends than my own family are. They're, she's my family. She's my sister.
Mm-hmm.
Not by blood, but I would do anything for that woman because she's always been there to understand. And she's been through stuff herself. She can't have kids. She's got a husband who is bipolar. So she goes through a lot of stuff with him, and I've always told her, if you need me, call me.
Yeah.
We would do anything for each other. So I've always, fortunately I've had that. I just haven't had it from my significant others who are the people you most want it from, that person that you should be your go-to.
So that it's funny that you say that, because I was just thinking that as you were talking, and I had this question that my guess is probably, I don't know if you've thought about this or not. And so you might not know right offhand how to answer, but maybe we can play with it a little bit.
Okay.
So it sounds like you've managed to choose. Okay, so family you're born into, right? Blood family, right? You're born into.
Yeah.
Grandma was great. Sister, not so great, right? Like you sort of get what you get, right?
Yeah.
With regard to your friendships, it sounds like you've made really good choices in choosing friends who, ride or die kind of friends, right?
Yes.
Friends who your needs matter to them and they are willing to do what it takes to inconvenience themselves to whatever to show you that you matter and that you're important.
Yes.
And so from that regard, you had really good decision making, right? Like who you chose to keep and who you didn't.
I never thought of it that way.
Right. But then you chose two partners and it sounds like now things are different, but you chose two spouses who both had these sort of narcissistic traits and were very invested, it sounds like, in keeping you down. And so I wonder what the difference is in how you chose friends versus how you chose spouses.
I don't know. I really don't know, to be honest. I've got, the ladies that I'm friends with, and I've got, a guy friend too, that I've known him since I was 17 years old, and he's super supportive. I really don't know what it is that between choosing my, friends and then choosing the person that I'm going to be a partner with. I don't know. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know, right? I can't answer for you. And I don't want to speculate, but I imagine like we have ideas in our mind about like what the different roles mean, and what we think might be important in each of those roles. And so it's interesting, because I wonder how many other people. I know that there's a large population of people who have been involved in relationships that involve narcissistic abuse, right? Because narcissistic people can be very charming and they really know how to turn it on, right? So So I know there's a huge population. My sister actually runs a group on Facebook for survivors of narcissistic abuse, for people who've been in
Okay.
narcissistic relationships. And she's got like 4,500 people in that group and new people joining every day, you know?
Dang.
Yeah. And so there's no shortage, right? There's no shortage of people who find themselves in this scenario. And I can't help but wonder now, after talking to you, how many of those 4,500 people also have friends who are incredible, right? Like, I wonder how many of
Yeah.
them chose, a partner who ended up being sort of abusive and mistreated them, but have a network of friends who are solid.
That's interesting. I never ever thought of it that way,
Mhm.
because I have some really supportive friends that are like, he never deserved you. I've seen it a long time ago. And, I think we think differently when it comes to a spouse
Mhm.
or partner, and how they're going to react and support.
Right.
And your spouse you're with all the time, your friends, it's like, okay, hey, I saw you, go home now, or hey, I'm gonna
Well,
go home, you go home.
yeah,
You're not around them all the time.
definitely less proximity. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a difference in how you deal with each other
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure my best friend Nikki, if I had to live with her, we might have a few fights. I don't think we've ever had a fight,
Right.
but I think we might, because we live differently. And I know we live differently,
Yeah.
but we also understand that we think differently, and we accept that in each other. We don't care. We're like, okay, whatever. I know you give me the last penny you had if you needed to,
Right.
but with a spouse or a partner, it's for some reason it's a little different in how you think. But I couldn't tell you why I chose.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, the more time you spend with someone, the more likely you are to end up in an argument or to have a fight with them of some sort. I guess the real question, though, right, is what happens maybe during and after the argument, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
you, either friends or partners with somebody who can fight fair, meaning that they, will argue their side of a disagreement, but not necessarily attack your character
Yeah.
or become, or threaten or become abusive in any kind of way. And then what happens afterward? How do we, um, end the fight and demonstrate that even if we disagree, that you're still somebody who matters, right, and is important to them. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like, I'm thinking in myself, which people in my life I think could do that, right? I could do that with, versus people maybe who couldn't or wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. I think it also has to do with the people themselves. So, like, my sister is one of those ones where she's got to have the last word.
Mm-hmm.
If we're in an argument, she's always got to have the last word. And not, I'll be like, just drop it. Let's just stop the conversation. We're not going to agree on it, so let's just drop it.
Right.
Well, but and it's like, no, but just shut up. Just
Right.
stop the conversation. And she can't. Some of my girlfriends where it's like, okay, I know we're going to disagree, so we'll give each other our points, and it's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. Right.
It's just, even with my romantic relationship that I have now, we have some disagreements, and it'll be okay. There's been a few times where we've been, because he works third shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I work first shift. So there's times where it's like, okay, we just have to stop this conversation and let's get back to it tomorrow when we can be face to face, because this over the phone crap isn't working.
Right.
It's just, it's hard enough being on different shifts as it is, because 5 out of the 7 nights a week,
Miss each
he's
other.
not home.
Yeah.
So it's a lot harder to keep that connection and stay connected to each other. So there's times where we have to literally be like, we just need to come back to this. We'll discuss it later. I don't want to have, I don't want to have an argument with you. Let's just drop it. And, we do, and we move on.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to it and discuss it later, and we're both calmer. And
yeah. So the willingness to do that, right, is important on both sides.
It is
Yeah.
immensely.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Because
I guess like I'm wondering, like I'm thinking about being, 22, 24. So that's like a quarter of a century ago for me, right? And and like, would I have known then? And there's the answer is absolutely no. There's no way I would have known that that's an important quality to look for, right? Can this
Yep.
person like disagree with me, but not take it so personally that it's got to be, you know, fire and brimstone kind of fight, and
Mm-hmm.
B, is this person willing to like, is their intent, is their goal in a disagreement to land on common ground together with me, or is their goal to win?
Yeah. And that's, like that just brought up a thought in my head with my ex-husband, my first ex-husband. He would, when we would have a fight, it was, I was wrong, he was right, and I just
Mhm.
needed to shut up.
Right.
My opinion didn't matter, and part of it's probably age. I'm a little older now, where now I'd be like, okay, well, if you don't care about my opinion, then there's the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back when I was in my early 20s, that's not how I thought. And then I didn't understand too that sometimes you gotta let some things go. You gotta pick your battles.
Can't die on every hill.
Yeah, and like I said, my sister's one of those people that has to win. She's
Right.
always got to have the last word. Where with her, my stance with her now is just like, okay, whatever, you win, bye.
Yeah.
I'm done talking about it, because
Right.
it's not who I am. And I've done a lot of personal self-growth where I've tried to look at myself and how I deal with relationships and my friendships and everything in my life,
Yeah.
to grow and go, what, sometimes it's just not worth the fight.
Yeah. It's so hard to find the right way or an effective way to um especially with people who are in your life, right? Especially with family members or other people who are, some people you can just be like, okay, I don't need you in my life anymore, and out.
Mm-hmm.
But other people who you're going to see time and time again, it's so hard to find a way that keeps your boundaries intact
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrates like some self-importance, right? Some self-compassion. Like, I need to take care of myself. That's what you're doing with your sisters. Like, if I enter into this argument with you, I am not taking good care of myself.
Yeah.
Because I could probably just do both sides of the argument on my own, right? I kind of know how it's going to go.
Yep, pretty much.
Right? Yeah. And so I'm unwilling to do that, right? I'm not willing to do that. But then there's like, and in some cases it might be fine. Like, I don't care if I'm being passive aggressive with you or whatever. But in other cases, it's like, well, how do I do that? And maybe I don't want to be passive aggressive, or maybe I don't want to just kind of throw my hands up and give up. And it's really hard, man. There are people in my life where it's taken me decades to get to the point where like I can confidently say a sentence that sounds something like, I'm not willing to engage in this argument with you this way. However, if at some point you're willing to discuss things this way or that way, maybe we can reapproach it. Or to just say, you know what, it's not good for me to be in this discussion. Like, I'm not going to engage in it. And it's, and it's amazing because it's a really simple sentence. And on the surface, there's like nothing wrong with that. That seems like it should be fine. But people are appalled when you say something like that.
They are. And if they're the ones that like to win, they don't like that.
Right. And some people just like the drama of it, right? Like, how could you not fight with me,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I've gotten to a point in my life. I'm not going to fight about certain things. I have an aunt that is, she's a wonderful aunt.
Mm-hmm.
We disagree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But we're adults. So we say, oh, okay, we'll disagree.
Sure.
There it is. There, end of conversation.
Yeah.
My aunt's marriage is different than what I look at marriage as.
Yeah.
And we just agree that we just live differently. Like,
Yeah.
that's just, that's how we are. And that's fine. Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And my uncle, that's fine. That's not how I want to live. That's not what's going to work for me.
Yeah.
And we can understand that. Now tell that to my sister and she'd be like, no, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I just, with her, I just don't engage with her anymore because, I've got a niece that's 19 this year. When my sister and I had that fight where she got mad at me, it was, oh, we're going to throw the child in and go, you can't talk to my daughter anymore either. Okay, let me see how that works out for you. I'm not going to talk to my niece, please.
Right. Who's an adult?
Exactly. She was
Right.
18 at the time. It was like, no, she's 18 years old. If she wants to talk to her aunt, she can call her aunt.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to stop me. And we still, to this day, my niece and I still text each other.
Right. And going back to like when I said about, we brought up like fighting fair, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, or attacking your character or any of those sorts of things, right? Like, I mean, what does her daughter have to do with you and her having a disagreement, right? Like,
and that was my point. And she was like, well, I just don't like your, what did she say? I can't remember exactly, but basically she didn't want me to have an influence
right.
on my niece and how I live and what I say. And I'm like, she's an adult now.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm going to bring up the stuff that my sister and I argue with my niece. My niece doesn't need to know that. My conversations with my niece are how's college, who's the current boyfriend,
Yeah.
You're driving, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to bring her into my adult life. That's right. Not what it's about. It's here. Right. Let me send you a picture of Titan because she's a dog lover. And it literally was like, oh, it's a divorced parents. Let's use the kid in the middle of the divorce. No, you don't do that. She has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's definitely got that flavor, right? It's definitely a power play, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that can be super toxic, right? That's so hard to deal with, especially when it's somebody who you probably love and care about, like a sibling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's a very love-hate relationship between us.
Yeah, it sounds it. And I mean, love and hate are close cousins. They have a lot more in common. A lot of people think of them as opposites, but the opposite of both of them is indifference, right? It's like,
yep.
Once you don't care anymore, then there's neither love nor hate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, so you had this, this, really sort of tragic experience with your child being stillborn.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about these two marriages. And to me, I think at first blush, if you will, it sounds like 3 traumatic events. But there sounds like there's a difference to me in the impact they've had on you. Like, mm-hmm. So your reactions, for example, to your child sound to me, and I don't mean to be splitting hairs, but I'm curious in how we rebuild our lives after different hardships, right? And so your reactions to your stillborn child sound to me less like trauma and more like grief, right? It's like every year on an anniversary, I get sad, right? If I think about it in a certain way, that, oh my God, it's 18 years, I get really sad, but not necessarily like something triggers me and I have this huge setback that I need to rebound from, right? Anniversaries are hard and there's grief and rightfully so, right? I mean, I in my life, thankfully, both of my children are healthy and alive and in good spirits. But I lost my mother when I was 7. And so, she got sick when I was 4 and died when I was 7. And so now, like 41 years later, there's still grief, right? Like
Yeah.
they're still missing her, and they're still, and I went like you, I was angry at the world for a long time. I felt like it was super unfair. I saw
Mhm.
these other kids who, you know, I would always be appalled, like absolutely appalled when I saw kids like talking bad to their mom, fuck you, mom, or whatever. And I'd be like, oh my God, like, do you know how lucky you are to like,
Yeah.
and, and it took me a long time to get to a point where it was like, no, I can't compare with them, right? The best I can do is actually be happy for them that they don't have to know that kind of grief, right? Like,
Yeah.
they don't have to. But it sounds to me like the marriages and the divorces maybe had more of a trauma impact on you than the death. Although maybe like the death of your child like feels bigger, it just seems to have a different quality.
I agree with that. I think that day when I was in the hospital,
Yeah,
that in itself, because I don't remember the whole day. My mom told me
yeah.
things that I did and said that I'm like, no, I didn't. She's like, yes, you did. I don't remember. I blocked it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's more grief. Like I to this day still cannot hold an infant. I can't do it. It's too hard for me.
Yeah.
I'll see, and it's harder for little boys,
Right.
for me, because I wanted nothing but a little boy, and I got a little boy, and then I didn't have a little boy.
Yeah.
But my marriage is more of, especially the way my second marriage ended, was they're much more traumatic in the fact of, when I finally realized what my first marriage was all about and the impact it had on me as a person, that's where I started to actually heal from it and work to do things to make myself, because I was like, he's not going to have control over me. And I'm not even married to the fucker anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm going to have control over me. I'm not going to let him, because I remember the last thing I said to him, we were standing at the bank after splitting the funds up. And he looked at me and he goes, are you ready for a world you can't handle without me? And I looked at him and I said, I will thrive without you.
Good for you.
And, one of the things he told me that I could never do because I was uncoordinated was ride a motorcycle. Look at me now.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, my second ex-husband, he didn't tell me. I didn't have any clue he wanted a divorce. Had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Came home one day, told me he wanted a divorce. I freaked out and went to my girlfriend's, and we had a camera in the house. He forgot about it, brought a woman into my home, and I caught him. He did the one thing that he knew would hurt me the most, and that was cheat on me. And from that point on, to me, that does a thing to a woman where you give someone all your trust and your care, and you really think that this is your person, and then they basically just stomp on it.
Yeah.
That really, I think that probably, because it's much more recent to me, has an impact on how I thought about things. And, again, it's kind of the same thing with my first ex. I'm not going to let that situation control me. So it's a work in progress still.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm working to not let my anger and my hurt and my resentment from what he did to me and how he treated me control how I deal with my future, and the relationship I'm in now. It still peaks in there. It's still part of it, but I try very hard to not let it be that way, because
can't unring a bell, right? Been through
I mean, it is what it is. And, I had people who knew both of us that said, he's losing the best thing to ever happen to him. Don't let this ruin you. You're a good woman. You were a good wife. And I knew him retiring out of the Marine Corps. I knew he was going to have issues. Did I think it was going to go to the extent that it went to? No.
No.
But it is what it is now. And, he's going to reap what he sows.
Yeah.
I have to move on from that.
Right. And you said you make efforts to move on. You try to not let it, you try not to let it sort of taint your life now and your relationships now. And so I'm wondering if there are specific things you do or practices you have or things that you sort of build into your lifestyle that help you with that, like that are purposeful for the intention of separating those past experiences from what's going on now?
Part of it is just, putting that trust in the fact that, the man that I'm with now is not going to do that to me.
Mhm.
But it's also, I've done a lot better in expressing my feelings.
Yeah.
And when something bothers me, hey, and I've told him I'm one that I need to have those cuddle times.
Mhm.
I'm a cuddler. I gotta have that touch and that feel. So he's very good about giving me hugs and kisses and holding my hand and that kind of stuff when we're together. But I've tried to consciously let him know when I'm feeling something, like when something's bothering me, or like he does something that I'm like, yeah, that's kind of annoying,
Yeah.
or whatever the case might be. I've tried to do that because, obviously a marriage takes two.
Yeah.
And there must have been something that I was not giving him that he went out and found elsewhere, but he didn't express it to me. So if I wasn't, I didn't know it.
Right.
So he, on all honesty, didn't give that marriage a chance because he kind of, I guess, in a way gave up.
Yeah.
And he wasn't fair to me because he didn't tell me what it was that he didn't get,
Right.
or that he wanted that I wasn't providing for him.
Right. And it's tricky because there are, for each one interaction, there are like two different sets of skills that need to happen, right? The person who's feeling like their needs aren't met. So in the marriage, maybe it was your ex-husband. Sometimes, you're talking about in your relationship now, sometimes it's you. You need to have the skill set where you can say, hey, you have to be able to identify what it is that's unmet and express it in a way that hopefully isn't attacking or blaming, but it's just saying, hey, this is going unmet for me. And as my partner, I'm coming to you because I want my need met, but I want it met specifically by you because it's important to me. And then the second skill set, right, is that the person receiving that has to have the skill set to hear it in a way that they don't take it personally as an attack.
Yeah.
Instead, take it personally as kind of as a compliment, like, hey, you matter enough to me that I want to give you the cheat sheet. I want to tell you what I need so that you can do it for me, and that we can connect, And so, a lot of us, if we weren't raised in sort of emotionally intelligent households, which again, that doesn't have to be super touchy feely. It just emotionally intelligent, right? Aware with a vocabulary and the ability to recognize, intangible needs, like needs for a sense of belonging and needs for feeling important. If we weren't raised with that, we have to figure out how to develop those skill sets on our own.
Well, thankfully, James, that's the man that I'm with, he's actually completely different than anyone else I've ever been with. Totally different than ex-husbands. And he actually he's very good about talking about his own feelings. He doesn't always understand them, but he's good at, expressing them. And I mean, he's got his moments. He's not perfect, but like I said, he's had his own trauma that, if he one day wants to, because I told him about you and, told him what this was about. And, if he wanted to bring that up and discuss it, and, I told him it might be therapeutic for you to go through what you've been through. He's very good about telling me himself how he's feeling about things. And, we try to really sit down and talk about things because we both have been through some bullshit.
Yeah.
And, the only way that we're going to make it work is to talk about it and, be there, support each other. And that I'm thankful for that now that, I finally at 41, finally found someone that really seems like he genuinely cares about my well-being, mentally, physically, everything.
Right.
It's
And maybe that's a product, right, of having learned things each step along the way, and then built different sort of boundaries for yourself of what you will and won't accept, right?
Yeah.
So now if you were excuse me, if you were hypothetically to meet your first or your second husband today, they wouldn't even have a chance because the boundaries are different. They'd bump into the boundaries, right? So James may be a product of, I tell my partner now frequently that, there's, on the one hand, you're 41, I'm 48. And so, creeping up on the half century mark. And,
you're getting old.
No, I am. I wish I knew the secret for getting young, but I am getting old. So I every once in a while I have a sense of like, man, I wish I met you sooner and had more time with you. But that's immediately replaced by, it's a good thing I didn't meet you sooner because I'd have fucked it up.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would have too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I there's things that, he does that annoy the shit out of me that I probably would have been like, yeah, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, I'm not even going to deal with it. Or I would have let it just stew.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And now I have no problem telling him, you do this one thing and it just annoys the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but it is what it is. You got to take the good with the bad. You take the flaws. You either love someone for all their flaws, but you also love them for their good attributes.
Yeah.
And you take the good with the bad. His good outweighs his bad. He's a good man. He's got good intentions. He's got a good heart. And he's definitely he's doing his part in helping me heal. And I'm trying to do that for him, to help him, because he's been through some shit himself. So we help each other.
Yeah.
And that that's also part of it too. Even with my girlfriends, my friend Nikki, she's been through some stuff herself with her family, and we lean on each other a lot. But it's having those people that actually understand, that can help you. At the same time, you have to want to help yourself.
Yeah. I have a friend, and people listening to this podcast are going to get tired of hearing about him because I mention him a lot, but he's sort of a mentor for me in this whole process of building a business. And he's a buddy of mine through jiu-jitsu, but turns out we have quite a few things in common. His name is Noble Gibbons, and he has a podcast and a business called the EQ Gangster. So he's the emotional intelligence guy. Yeah. But one of the things he says at the end of every one of his episodes, which sounds a lot like what you're talking about now, is he says, emotionally healthy people help other people heal emotionally. And that sounds like what you're describing in your relationship. So I'm glad that you found that and have that for yourself.
Yeah, I am too, because it was really hard when my second ex-husband did what he did to me.
Yeah.
It was really hard for a little while, and then it's been a rough road, but I'm a strong woman. I know I am. Emotionally, I know I am, because I've been through a lot.
Yeah.
But I was also raised to be that way.
Right.
My parents didn't raise me to be a quiet, timid, which anybody who knows me personally knows I'm not timid.
Yeah.
They didn't raise me to be that way. And my first ex-husband made me almost that way, because I was afraid to talk, because I didn't know what was going to be said. I didn't know how he was going to react. And, to this day now, I'm much more to the point where I'm like, no, I'm not going to be shy about it. If you don't like what I have to say, keep scrolling. Right. Don't listen to me then, Yeah. I am who I am, and either love me or hate me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to teach my kids, right? Like, a healthy relationship means that you should always be able to say how you feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And, you can disagree on all sorts of things with people, but you should always be able to say how you feel, and that should always be accepted by the other person.
Yep. Even if they don't understand.
Right.
And that was something that, you know, both of my ex-husbands didn't understand is they didn't, they thought my feelings were me just being a woman.
Right.
You know, quote unquote, you're just being a woman, you're emotional.
Right. Well, and you know, there's research that demonstrates that men are every bit as emotional as women are, except that women are taught that it's okay to demonstrate those emotions.
And men are not.
Men are taught it's not okay. Right.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is virtually anything that you know, and by the way, this is, let me be clear, this is not all men, this is not every man. Some men are raised by, you know, really sort of emotionally intelligent parents, and they're raised to have a good sense of themselves. But socially, generally speaking, in our society, men are raised such that, you know, anything, so you're allowed to be okay, right? Not great,
Mhm.
but okay. And anything else you feel, from hunger to shame to grief, if it's anything other than okay, then it's to be expressed as anger.
Yeah.
And so we have a population, unfortunately, of men who are really angry or seem really angry and are probably aggressive and violent. And if you could just sort of like move the anger aside a little bit and kind of look around it, you would see things like grief or sadness or shame or, you know, and there'd be opportunities for those men to heal,
Yep.
to be less angry, you know, and I'm not talking about, you know, to be clear, I'm not talking about like walking around through the world emoting everywhere you go, right? There's certain places where it's not appropriate. I totally, as I'm a psychologist, and I'll be the first one to say, like, you probably shouldn't break down crying in the boardroom, right? Like you probably should be able to manage it when you're like on stage delivering a presentation. But there's a time and a place when you could be sitting in a therapist's office or having coffee with a loved one. And if you could have the courage and the strength to be a little more vulnerable, and if you don't think that that requires courage and strength, I dare you to try it.
Yep.
And with that little bit of vulnerability, and somebody else could demonstrate some caring, and you wouldn't be necessarily rejected for that, then healing can begin, and things could be very different. So you know, it sounds like some of the men you've had in your life, I don't know them, and I don't want to pretend like, oh, I can say this is, but that sounds like a familiar, you know, familiar dynamic to me, where they blame it on gender roles, but gender roles are invented, you know. I mean, you could act more masculine if you wanted to, and men could act more feminine. It's not biological, right? What's biological is like the ability, you know, things dealing with pregnancy are essentially biological. Most of the rest of it is social.
Yeah. I mean, I know my first ex-husband, his dad was very chauvinistic and was very in the mindset that the man made the money, the man made the decisions, and that's how he raised his son. And, you know, if he didn't do things right, you know, he would chastise him. His father was just an evil man. Yeah. Just not a good person. Yeah. You know, and my second ex-husband, you know, he was raised with old school biker dad from the 70s that really wasn't part of his life until he was in like 17 years old, and then he joined the Marine Corps, and he was a tough badass Marine. Right. Yeah. You know, he couldn't let those emotions out. Yeah. You know, I mean, he told me multiple times that he said, I can't love you the way you deserve to be loved. I don't have that capacity to do that. And you're a good woman. You know, you deserve to be loved better than how I am. And I'm like, that's my choice, not yours. Right. And it's like, and it's, you know, I choose to see if you're loving me the way I want to be loved.
And it also sort of like reveals what I would consider kind of a sad perspective on who he is and his abilities, you know? Yeah. Yep. Unfortunate, right? So, you know, but yeah, it's these things are really, really tough, and we all come with our baggage, right? We all carry what we carry with us, and then we interact and things can get messy. messy. It's funny when you say that, when you talk about your first husband and his relationship with his dad, to go back to Noble's, the EQ gangster, go back to his saying, right? He says that emotionally healthy people help other people heal emotionally. And I think the opposite of that, right? Like the antithesis of that is probably the old saying, hurt people hurt people.
Yep.
It sounds like what you're describing with him and his dad.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, I hope I told his siblings, your brother has an issue. Your brother needs help.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't until a couple years later, one of his sisters reached out to me and was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't listen to you.
Yeah.
I should have. I understand what you were saying now. Turns out he's physically abusing his third wife.
Oh.
So he never got the help he needed. He didn't have anyone, had his family possibly listen to me when I said, your brother has anger issues. Right. He needs help, and they had seen it. Maybe this wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Thankfully I got out of that situation.
Yeah. Thankfully, indeed. Indeed. And I'm so glad that things are going better for you now, and that you've, created a life for yourself that feels happy and meaningful and fulfilling. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good to hear. And I feel, really inspired by the fact that even with that, you continue to work on yourself and continue to grow and build. And I value and appreciate that you're an active member in our online community on the Facebook group. And so that's great.
And that actually helps me, because it makes me think sometimes about my life and, some things. So I like that. And that's, I want to be the best version of me.
Right.
For me.
Yeah.
Not just, not for James, not for my mom, not for my dad, not for anybody, but for myself. Right. I just want to be happy for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it ends up benefiting all those people,
Yeah.
But if you do it for them and there's not a sense, it's fine to want to sometimes sacrifice for people you love, to make a sacrifice here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not working on yourself with a sense of self-importance and self-compassion, it's almost destined to fall short,
Yeah.
And so,
you really got to love yourself in order to be able to love someone else.
Right. And I will say there are people who disagree with that and say that you can heal through a loving relationship. And I would say that's true too. And maybe it's possible, like, if you don't fully get to the point of loving yourself in the beginning, at least having some sense that you are worthy of it, right? And deserving.
Yes.
Some sense of validation and self-compassion for that is probably, at least a minimum requirement, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I can agree with that one.
So anyway, I'm want to be respectful of our time, and I want to express how grateful I am for you being willing to come on and really courageously share your life and what you've been through. And I have no doubt that you doing this is going to help other people. So I appreciate that a great deal. I wanted to see if, before we wrap up, if there are any sort of, things you wanted to make sure you said, or anything you want to get in before we wrap up that you feel like might be important, closing ideas, closing words.
I did this for me, but I also did it if my situation and what I've been through and the story I told can help someone else, even one person.
Yeah.
Then, that makes it all worth it. I've had other women that tell me about their relationships, and, I have a friend of mine right now that she's in a verbally abusive relationship, and I'm trying to kind of coach her to prepare to leave, because she's miserable. She's, whatever I can do to help somebody else that's been in that, whatever I can do, I'll do it. It's unfortunate people have to go through that kind of stuff, but if someone else can help them, then I'll do my part, and supporting you as a friend, like, you're doing this podcast, and I want to support you as well. So,
yeah. And I appreciate that. it means a lot. And so some of the people that I end up talking to on here, work in a helping agency. They're therapists or doctors of some sort or social workers. And they certainly end up leaving, their website or their social media contacts. And I know that you don't work in a field like this. So if somebody has wants to reach out to you based on this podcast, would it make the most sense for them to go through me? And then I can reach out to you, or
that's fine. I mean, you can give them my information too. I'm open to it. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I just know, like, you said you work at a bank, right? So you probably don't want people emailing you at work or calling you at work.
Well, I mean, you can put my personal email
okay,
up there, the one that you have.
You can go ahead if you want to give it out. You can.
It's just Anderson wj80@gmail.com. So ANDERSON WJ80
okay
at Gmail.
So if you have comments or questions or want to reach out to Wendy for some reason, that's a way to reach her. And Wendy, I wanted to thank you again for your time on a Sunday afternoon. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening on whatever platform you listen on or watching on YouTube. I appreciate that. You can always reach out to me and find me. The website is Growth and Thriving, all spelled out. So growthandthriving.com. On Facebook, it's Growth and Thriving with an ampersand, not spelled out, Growth and Thriving LLC. The Facebook groups are Growth and Thriving After Trauma and Thriving Fathers, Parenting After Trauma. So please link up with us. You can also find Growth and Thriving on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm still figuring out Twitter. I find Twitter very weird. I don't use it very much. I check it, but I don't tweet much. So anyhow, thank you, everyone, and keep your eyes open. Coming very soon will be our first online course, which will be the ABCs of PTG. It'll be a 10-session program talking about some of the various skills and abilities and techniques that are used to help people achieve thriving after trauma. And it will be jam-packed with great information. So this is Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, and just signing off saying thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.